Welcome in. You're listening to the Dynasty Market Watch, where yesterday's price is not today's price, presented by the Bulletproof Family of Podcasts. I'm Todd Halverson. I am joined by Brian O'Leary and Matt Davis. We got a special episode for you. This is going to be a league review of Big Daddy Dyno. We got a 12-team Superflex league with full PPR. It kicked off last offseason. We'll allude to the startup draft here in a little bit. First off, let's just do a big round of applause. Congratulations for Mr. Tom Payton on his championship.
Woo!
Also, if you ain't first, you're last. So our boy Mandalorians of Murcia, he's got the first pick coming up. So we'll give a round of applause for the 101 as well. That's you get a little bit for that. So I'll go ahead and be the first one to say, Mandalorians of Murcia, your username is I don't even know where to start with that one. Something Naya Lanjandro. Anyways, you're on the clock, my friend. So congratulations for that.
I think it's NY Alejandro. I think. I don't know.
Okay. Now maybe he's from New York.
Okay.
New York Alejandro. I like it. Okay. Now I'm following. So we're going to be going team by team through the Big Daddy Dyno. We're going to kind of start off on the two divisions. So we've got the Gulag and we've got the Gridiron. And if you're listening in and you're not part of the league, this is a relegation league. So the Gulag is in the relegation. The Gridiron, those are the guys fighting for the championship. So we'll go team by team. We'll start off with the Gulag. We'll run through all those teams, and then we'll go to the teams that are really fighting for something this upcoming season. So sit back, relax. You ready to have your team shit on a little bit? Let's have some fun. Brian, play that Fat Joe.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
All right, Brian, we'll go team by team. I'm going to let you kick it off. Who are we going after first in the Gulag? Before I let you answer, one thing is on YouTube, we will have the Keep Trade Cut league rankings, how they have their values set up, which is not an end-all be-all by any means, but I think it's like a nice way for us to be able to see all of the teams outside of Sleeper, because Sleeper on desktop is jacked. So on Keep Trade Cut, we can see the league rankings that they have, and it's a nice, easy way for us to see each team that we're evaluating as we go through here. So Brian, kick us off. Which team we got first?
Yeah, Todd, this is one that our notes are a little bit harsh, but it sounds like we might have some differences in opinion. So this could be a fun little debate to have here. We're starting off with the Hornchurch Hunters, managed by Steve. To me, this team kind of jumps off the page as they made some moves, and we've all been there. They've made some moves that didn't quite work out for them, and it's going to be an uphill battle, I think. But, it sounds like maybe, Matt, you think there's less of an uphill battle than I previously thought.
Well, hold up. Before Matt answers, I just want to say that, Brian, in your notes, it says this team is fucked. So
that's the harshness. We're
just going to start off with a bang right here. We're just going to come in hot, and let's just call it how we see it. So, Matt, you disagree. So the floor is yours.
So I'll defend our boy STE a little bit here. I don't know if it's Ste or STE, the username, but I wouldn't quite say they're fucked. I would say that they made some trades that haven't really worked out, but I can see a path to them being competitive where if things fall right for them, they could be potentially strong enough to maybe get out of the Gulag. I wouldn't say they're totally hopeless. Like when I think of a hopeless team, it's, they don't have two quarterbacks. They don't have two running backs. Like they can't fill out a lineup. That's not this team, right? They have, like some pieces, right? They have Purdy, Pittman, Pitts, Achane, Stafford, Geno, Montgomery, Pitts, Deontay, Cup. So like if you get a Cooper Cup bounce back, if you get Deontay gobbling up targets in Carolina, I can see a path to them being pretty competitive next year. That's really where I'd start out with that. I don't think it's like I've seen much worse teams in this.
So I see where they were headed when they made the moves, and it's just something that over the years I've found personally trying different strategies. When you go all in the startup, you leave yourself zero margin for error, right? And I think this is like a evidence of that. Like you're saying, they aren't going to be the worst team this year. I agree with that. But I also don't think they're going to be the best, and that's the only way that this strategy kind of really works out, in my opinion. And that's where the volatility comes in, like them being in the relegated division for this year. Like Cooper Cup could have a great year, and all that does is get him out of the division. So now you're looking to catch lightning in a bottle twice when he has no real longer term assets besides those top 3 or 4 guys we're looking at: Purdy, Pitts, Pittman, HN, I guess, but some of those are even volatile.
Yeah, so I would say
concerning.
to go back to what Todd said at the beginning, just to recap here. This is a relegation type league where the bottom 6 teams, the 6 teams that don't make the playoffs, are in what's called a gulag. You need to be the best of those 6 teams, and then you replace the worst team of the top 6 teams the following year, which is the gridiron division. So that's what you're referring to there. That this team has to be the best of the bottom 6. Let's talk about. Oh, go ahead,
Todd, come on in and be our tiebreaker here initially.
Yeah. So if I were this team, I don't have my pick for 2025. Don't have my pick for 2026. Do I have my pick? No. So I don't have my 25 or my 26. Yeah. I am. Eventually, you have to get out of the gulag. The issue is that you're going to have other teams fighting to get out as well. So I'm probably not pushing hard to get out of this spot, because if you do, you're probably just digging a further hole. So if you're making moves just to get out of the gulag, what's most likely going to happen is you get out this year, even like in a best case scenario, you get out and then a year from now you're back in it. And so you're just digging more of a hole. So I would probably take my medicine, maybe join another startup just to bide my and let this one mellow for a bit, because it needs some time. It's going to take some time to get out of here, but there's no point in coming in last. So let's just start there. You don't have your pick. You don't have your pick in 25. You don't have your pick in 26. I doubt that the person that has it is going to be thrilled to be giving it back to you either. So I think just kind of like, kind of wear it on the chest and say, all right, I've got a league like this. Brian, we're all 3 in a league where I have a team very similar, where every move I made was just jacked. And I was very open to, like, I'm just going to eat it, and I'm going to eat a couple more buy-ins and just tank it out. Fortunately, I had my picks, but my team was debilitated, worse than this team is debilitated. So I think it's just a manner of being willing to bite the bullet, take one on the chin, and come back in a year or 2 when things have settled. So obviously this team has an uphill battle, but there's some pieces that Matt mentioned. You've got Pitts, you got Achan. Purdy is a really good QB to have. So there's some pieces here, but I think this is one where you got to kind of just wear it on the chin, live another day.
So something that I'm thinking about and hoping for in this setup, again, not ideal. It's certainly not what I would be looking for, but I've also been there. So there's zero judgment on that side of things. Do I think you're kind of fucked? Yeah. But here's the silver lining. Like, to me, I'm trying to cash out when one of these or more than one of these guys has a good start to the season and get multiple assets out of it. So you're not necessarily tanking, right? But you could turn Devin Achan into, like, say he has a hot start to the season. You trade him to someone in the contending division, and you get a receiver that's a little less volatile, a little more longer term. Doesn't really hurt you short term in terms of like trying to get out of the gulag. Those are the types of moves that I'm kind of looking for. It might not happen, but if those things approach you, I would at least enter with an open mind. Like, don't just be like, oh, I love Kyle Pitts, so I have to keep Kyle Pitts. If you can turn Kyle Pitts into, I don't know, like TJ Hawkinson plus for someone that's like not wanting to wait for TJ Hawkinson if he's having a slow start to his recovery, that type of thing is something that is not going to hurt you. long term, and you gain something out of it.
So I think it's important to, when we're talking about this team, we have to talk about the two big trades that they made in the past year. And I think one of them is a little more defensible than the other one, but we're just going to kind of talk about these two trades to discuss the type of trades that we're looking to make when we're shaping our teams. So the big trade that they made that was a win now, it looks like they were pushing to get out of the gulag. They traded Anthony Richardson and their 24 first, which became the 107, and Treylon Burks, who doesn't matter, for Brock Purdy, David Montgomery, Geno Smith, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Lockett, and Travis Kelce. That's a pretty good return for, like, you're trading Anthony Richardson in a first, so that's a really high price. You're getting 6 good starters there. Geno, maybe not a great starter. Lockett, maybe not a great starter, but they're weekly starts. You can feel okay about that. I can see why they made this type of trade when they made it. If they're pushing to get out of the gulag, it just didn't probably work out that well for them with Kupp falling off, Geno not having a great year, Lockett's a year older, Kelce looked a year older, and also they did just trade Kelce a few weeks ago, and the return that they got for Travis Kelce was a 210 in this year's rookie draft and a 2026 third. So they didn't get a lot for Kelce, but I understand wanting to kind of get out before he completely falls off. But maybe they're already kind of thinking what you were saying. They looked at their team and came to the same conclusion you did, Brian, and they're saying, okay, let's start moving some of these veteran pieces. Maybe try and get a little bit more, but
yeah,
I don't know.
I wouldn't totally just give away everything, because this team, you're not really benefited by coming in last or getting the 101, because it's not going to be your 101. So if I'm this team, I'm only making moves like that are value wins. Otherwise, I'll just eat my third to last place finish or whatever it ends up being and just kind of wear it on the chin, like I mentioned. So we've spent enough time on the Hornchurch Hunters.
Yeah,
let's move on to another squad. Who we got, Brian?
We're gonna tackle the Dudley Degenerates, managed by Brett Lahr. After I cook the books here.
Yeah, so this team has a ton of draft capital built up in the next few years.
So Keep Trade Cut likes them.
So Dudley Degenerates, ran by Brett Lahr. We've got like you said, they've got a lot of picks. So we've got 9 firsts in the next 3 years. So there's not a lot to talk about in terms of the roster, but in terms of picks, this team is just rolling.
I think they have 11 firsts over the next 3 years. I'm pretty sure they have 102, 104,
right.
110 this year, then 3 extra 25 ones, 3 extra 26 ones.
Yep, you're right. I was looking at it as just 3.
And,
so yeah, you're right.
And it's worth noting the 102 and 104 this year are definitely worth more than like a base first, right? Like those are really valuable first round picks. And yeah, they got 4 firsts next year and then 4 firsts in 2026. So actually, 11. Yeah, so 11 firsts the next 3 years. Their roster highlights are really just Bryce Young, Drake London. I guess if you want to say Christian Watson and Hollywood Brown.
It's funny that we have these 2 teams as our first 2 teams. We did not do this intentionally. It was just kind of a free flow. That it's like 2 polar opposite approaches to what a team build can be. There's no right or wrong answer. But with this situation, in my opinion, they have a lot more flexibility. That it's a very dynamic setup that, like you're mentioning, 102, 104 being worth more than a base 1. Like they could say, hey, yeah, I want Marvin Harrison Jr., but 104 I want to turn into 108 plus. Or, in a year, if their rookies hit, they can be like, hey, I want to cash in some of those 26 or 25 ones for stud X and stud Y. They can pivot pretty quickly if that's the route they chose. And if they
Yeah, so-
don't, they can say, hey, rookie fever, I want all the rookies. Give me them all. I'm going to hit. I do my research. That's it. Then that's their play too.
Yeah, so
And
this team has a ton of value build up, like you're talking about. I think the question for me is, at what point do you get out of the goulash or gulag, however you pronounce it?
Gulag.
Because at some point you're going to have to get out to even have a chance to win. So the way the team is structured right now, even if we add the picks, this team's probably not getting out, based on what I can tell. So then you're looking at 2025 before you can get out. And then the 2026 season is when you can actually play for a championship. So if I'm this team, I'm probably teetering on the idea of, do I shove a few of my chips in to compete this year to get out of the gulag? And by the time we kind of run through some more of these gulag teams, we might have a better sense of who that team is that's going to get out of it. But you got a lot of assets built up. It's tough to just sit there holding them and not playing for anything. So that'd be the question for me is, and maybe we come back to this team in a bit, on when do they try to push the chips in? Maybe it's this season at some point to get out of here, because you're not playing for anything in the gulag.
And I do want to point out a big trade that is important when you were talking just now, Todd, about trading your guys for plus value and timing your trades, so you're trading them when people actually want them. Halloween last year, the end of October, this team traded Devon Achan to the STE team for a third and his 25 and 26 first. So if you remember, towards the end of October last year is when Achan was off. He timed that trade perfectly to maximize the return that he got. And he got the 25 and 26 first of the team we had just covered. That's the type of thing that you want to do. If you're really bereft of assets, don't trade them in the middle of the summer when, people aren't really going to pay top dollar for them. Wait till October following like a 30, 40 point week. And then people are like all of a sudden willing to give you 2 firsts for a guy that's really only worth 1.
Bereft is a hell of a word, by the way. Hell of a word.
Thank you.
Not just a hat rack up there, boys.
All right, let's move on to NY Alejandro. Maybe we'll come back to the Deadly Degenerates at some point when we kind of hash out where we view the top team from the gulag.
Oh my God.
Yep. So this is a team that made that trade that we were talking about: Purdy, Monty, Cup, Gino, Kelsey, Lockett, and he got Anthony Richardson and what became the 107 this year, which is a really nice pick. So
And
good
he's got
trade
the
to
101.
consolidate. Yeah, and he does have the 101 too. Correct.
So you've got the AR team, Anthony Richardson team, probably going to add Caleb Williams, I imagine. There's not another quarterback really of note on this team. They do have my boy Trey Lance, shout out to him, but he's not starting anytime soon. So you're probably adding Caleb Williams to this Anthony Richardson team. It's already a team that has Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson. The issue with the team is that there's nothing really after that, not a whole lot of depth. But you're adding the 107 as well. You got Nick Chubb. Like, there's some opportunity here, but I think the lack of depth concerns me about this team getting out of the gulag, because there's going to be some team out of the gulag that's going to shove.
And I think that team we haven't covered yet, and that
Yeah.
I'll make my stake if you guys don't agree with that one. But yeah, I think this is a very nice start. But it is gonna. I think it's probably, unless they if they strip down Chase or Wilson, I wouldn't recommend doing that. But if they did that, they would, like you're talking about, gain some depth and maybe still have, like if they traded Garrett Wilson for DJ Moore plus or something like that.
Yeah, you know me. We're staying out of the wide receiver glob. So
yeah, I agree.
If you're an avid listener, I've been talking about being out of the glob. So I would stick with Wilson. But one thing that I would be potentially looking at is, can I move Chase for a wide receiver ahead of the glob in that Garrett Wilson tier and get a plus? That would be something that would make sense to me. if I could add a little depth and stay with a highly valued player.
Would you
That
trade Chase for Puka plus an early 2?
Yeah, I think I'd be pretty good with that. Depending on how early, because in my view, there's a pretty significant teardrop after about the 201, 202. So am I on the I would probably want to make that type of deal like on the clock if it was like 203, 204 and know who I'm getting. One thing you could maybe look at is like a broader, like you got to make there are a lot of moving pieces here, but maybe you trade back from Caleb Williams and you get a plus, and you add like you get like a Drake May, or you get the JJ McCarthy, and you get a nice plus there. I think this team had, like you mentioned, they're headed in the right direction. This would be a fun team to have because there's a lot of different ways you can play this. You could also just sit tight and just say, you know what, I'm going to be in the gulag for another year, but 2025 is going to be the season that I'm going to shove. There's some other teams that might be a little bit more better positioned. So this is a fun team. There's like it's fun having like 5 top 15 players or however many they got.
Really fun. Totally agree.
Yeah, I would agree with you guys that so this guy has all his future picks. So he does, to Brian's point about not having any depth, but having the 3 high-end pieces in Chase, Garrett, and Richardson, and then 4 in Caleb. Then we can add like probably Odunze or Powers at that 107. So I think if you're gonna strip down Chase or Garrett, maybe wait until the end of next year, or do it in season while they're popping off and exploding, that type of thing. See if you can get the best possible return by timing the trade correctly. But I think that they will need to do that sooner or later, like in the next year or so. I think they're going to need to break down one of these high-end pieces because they just don't have enough picks, and they just don't have enough depth to, I mean, you're looking at, if you're staying the course, you're looking at 2 or 3 years before you're even competing to get out of the gulag probably.
Yeah.
And one thing I will say, Brian, and you're in a few leagues, I've done this. It's not a trade that's that popular with everybody. It depends on how you feel about Drake May, but in 3 separate leagues, I've traded Caleb Williams for Drake May in a 25 first. That's a trade I'm comfortable making. Maybe you can get more than I was able to. I wasn't able to get more than that. But that would be a trade that I'm trying to look at if you're going to break down one of these pieces. See if you can get a young player that you really like plus a first. I
was going to say, in this hypothetical, you're using Drake May because you love Drake May. It could be Jane Daniels. It could be JJ McCarthy. It could be, second, third year quarterback that's currently in the league that you like, whatever it is that you see as high upside. Yeah.
And last comment before we move on to the next one. So, Brian, you mentioned making trades in the startup. I was trying to figure out, why does this team not have a 24 second, and which became the 201, and this team traded it to SMHRC just to move up in the 8th round of the startup. So maybe I can figure out who they moved up to get to see if it became worth it. But those trades in startups where you are trading up and giving up future picks, those things can be detrimental. And so that's one that kind of hurts because that could have been a Bo Nix, would have maybe allowed that opportunity to trade back from Caleb to Marvin Harrison, or maybe take Bo Nix, or have other pieces. But I'll check and see who they took with that pick. But I thought that one was interesting. Giving up 201 as part of that startup trade.
That's definitely a worthwhile note. I don't know how new or not new this group is to Dynasty, but startup trading can really, really shift things in your favor or into your detriment for sure, like very quickly. So it seemed like they were relatively cautious in the startup, but.
And I think it's important.
Geno Smith was who they got with the pick.
Oh, yeah. No,
ended up trading him though, right? So
I was going to say, so that was the deal that got Anthony
Richardson.
The important part is to not lie to yourself, to be honest with where you're at. And it looks like this guy did that. He said, you know what, this team isn't good enough. And he's the one that traded Purdy, Monty, Cup, Geno, etc. for AR in the first. So he was trying to consolidate some guys that aren't going to elevate in value into Richardson in the first, which did. All right. So
let's move
moving
on
on.
to the next one, Brian. Who we got?
We got the Glasgow Turtle Bays by Turtle Toys. Turtle Toys? I don't know how to say that. That's
He
a
was
tongue
headed
twister
for
for
like
me.
a Blastoise reference, maybe,
Or
and
like a tortoise and a turtle. I don't.
yeah, and then he went off track
It's
to
hard to say.
the bootleg version of Pokemon. I'm not sure.
It's hard to say. Yeah. Shout out to Blastoise though.
Yeah, Blastoise, he was a good one, man. Who was it?
This
Squirtle? Yeah.
yeah, Squirtle to whatever the fuck the other thing is, but there was a lot of water going on. Speaking of water, we got Justin Jefferson at the top. That's always a good start.
Always a good start. I mean,
doesn't
have
matter
you ever
your
looked at
build.
a Justin Jefferson team and been like, "Nah, I hate this team"? No, it's never happened.
I think
If
I
you look
took
at a Justin
5
Jefferson team,
orphans.
you're like, "Yeah, I'm in on that."
I think I took 5 orphans on last year just so I could have more Justin Jefferson. So you don't have to talk to me about it for sure. That being said,
That being said,
It's not great.
After
there's a lot of
Jefferson.
weirdish connection to this. Like Tua is like very. I think everyone's kind of at this point like he's pretty volatile injury wise. He doesn't run. Is he just like kind of reliant on the big plays that Tyreek and Waddle get him and the fast guys in the backfield? We got Watson, who's Rapey McGee. We got Devontae Adams, who awesome player, but who knows how long he's going to stick around. He might have like a Julio type of fall off at some point here. Njoku's like a nice piece, but he's not going to, get you out of the gulag or goulash, as Todd likes to refer to it as. So I don't know. 105, 205, and 305. So they have their own picks. So that's looking at, I don't know what they would want to. I would probably want to trade back into the 107, 108 and kind of have my decision made for me. But I don't. This is kind of a weird. They don't have excess assets, and they kind of have like a bunch of win now type of like running backs, Mixon, Swift, Najee, Alvin Kamara. Michael Mayer's value took a big hit in the draft, probably.
So I think this team is primed to make some trades based on what you were just saying. And I think the thing to keep in mind, and not to beat a dead horse, but, time those trades correctly. Tua has a history of starting off pretty hot, September and October. So maybe 105, let's say they can't trade back. Let's say 105, they get Daniels or May or McCarthy, right? At that point, they have 4 quarterbacks with Baker, Tua, and Deshaun Watson. So September rolls around, Tua and Devontae start off really hot, right? Maybe you can trade Tua and Devontae for a young wide receiver, Jalen Waddle, whatever, etc. Maybe Puka, Garrett Wilson, whatever. So I think that's what I would look to do probably, but I also like your suggestion of seeing what you can get from the guy that has 107 or 108 if they want to move up to 105 for a quarterback, since usually it's a quarterback that goes at 105.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And it's not so much this team. So this may be just thinking about the whole gulag as a whole. And what are your thoughts on a team maybe like this that has some potential win now pieces? There's not a lot of total value on the team. But there's a lot of teams in the gulag that, to be frank, aren't getting out. Could this be a team, or maybe there's another team that might say, hey, let me see if I can just get out of the gulag and then get into the gridiron and just hang out in the gridiron while I'm kind of retooling? Is that risky? Hell yeah, it's risky. But I could see it working if you've got maybe 6 teams in the gulag. All I have to do is be better than the worst one, or in the gridiron, be better than the worst one. And there's going to have to be one team that gets out. We've already talked about a few teams that we're saying like, no, we're not ready to push. At some point, we're going to have a team that gets out. So like if you had a team that started kind of hot, maybe you just try to get out of the gulag and hang out in that gridiron and just stay above water. I don't
Well,
know if
and
this
there
is a
is
team to do it, but maybe there is a team that could do that.
I think there's three teams. There's 3 out of 6 that can probably make a run out of getting out of the gulag this year, in my opinion. I think this is
there.
one of them in a vague sense. Like there's a lot of unknown within this,
Yeah.
but I think they have the chance to.
Well,
It
and
would probably have to come with trading away probably Tua, and then riding. You're needing luck along the way. So like riding Baker, riding Watson, maybe 105 becomes Neighbors and he has a Puka-like season. And then you've got a pretty decent starting lineup built around Justin Jefferson. You got decent running backs, though not sexy. So, but I think this team is playing middle ground right now, which is not a place you want to be in Dynasty. But could you get out of the gulag? Maybe.
And there's one team that's going to fall out of the gridiron without a trade that we'll get to later that double tapped Pickett and Ritter in the startup and now has no QB2. So we'll get to that later. But yeah, I think there's a chance to move up there. So when looking through this team, I did not see any notable trades, and I would say that is something that I would look to change if I was this owner in the next year. The rest
this
of the
team
season.
seems to have gotten a little bit stale in 12 months.
What about something like I forget who? Oh, it looks like Higgins is on. Maybe it's something like Devontae Adams for T. Higgins, like some type of like package where you're getting younger. You might lose some short-term production, but you might not. Like a higher upside guy that's being devalued right now to me. Like Higgins is just the guy that jumps out at me, but I know Todd's a glob guy, but that's just someone
I had
that
T. Higgins in my Twitter bio for 6 months, so you'll never hear me throw shade at T. Higgins.
No slander here. Okay, good. That's just someone that I think he's being valued, I think, at wide receiver 22 right now, T. Higgins, and I think his upside is far greater than that. You might be able to find this next team that we're going to talk about in a minute. Maybe they want to make sure that they get some more solidified points short term, and that's probably Devontae Adams versus T. Higgins. And there might be a little deal within the gulag that is on the board there. I don't know, something like that.
So Great transition for yourself. So go ahead and let's hit the next team in the gulag, Mr. Sean Haywood, the Birmingham Rollers.
Birmingham Rollers.
So Brian, you said this is kind of the team that we view as the heavy favorite to get out of the gulag, but there's no future picks. So like there's some holes in the armor here.
And the wide receivers are tricky. They got T. Higgins. Amari Cooper is probably their wide receiver too.
Mm-hmm.
Then they have guys like Judy Downs and Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel is probably going to be the best of those three next year, maybe. But that's a noticeable weak point on their team. Otherwise, they have Burrow, Josh Allen, Jacobs, Saquon. They got Evan Ingram at tight end. And they don't have a lot of depth on their bench. The one thing that I found interesting with this team, now none of us are fans of trading your next 3 first-round picks. We're almost always going to be against that. If you're going to do it, Josh Allen is the exact type of player that you want to receive in return. And that's what this team did. They traded their next 3 firsts plus an extra 24 second, and they got Josh Allen. So in a vacuum, that's not bad value. You just got to have a team good enough where those picks don't all end up early.
I think we've seen the last couple of years, Josh Allen is an immovable force. He's a cheat code. He's someone that like you can have kind of a weird ass team and but he just goes off for 4 touchdowns, 80 yards rushing, whatever else, and he just kind of carries you to a win on that given week. That we know there's so much variance in Dynasty, and with that, steady, consistent, elite production is king. And I mean, he's the cream of the crop. So like that, like you're saying, like I have some concerns about Burrow, if I'm being honest, like longer term. But I mean, there's worse things to have than Joe Burrow as your QB2 for sure. And with the teams that we've talked about in terms of short term, this to me, like, that is an incredible floor raising start of a team that he's going to be in the mix, whether he gets out of the gulag or not. I think he will, but he's going to be in the mix.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I think he is maybe like we talked about. I think he's maybe a couple of receivers away, or maybe not even. Maybe if he doesn't even make a move, his team is strong enough to get out of the gulag. Because we're not talking about the best teams in the league. We're talking about the bottom 6. So
Yeah,
I'd agree with you. I think this team is a favorite. I think there are some moves that they can kind of consider looking at. But I would think that they did the Burrow-Higgins stack intentionally. A lot of people do that type of thing intentionally. I know that's a pet peeve of Brian's. He does not like people like if it happens naturally, fine, but don't go out of your way to get a stack. It's not that efficient in Dynasty compared to other formats.
This is a quick tangent that I need to go on. I am in a league. It's 2 quarterback league, 10 team, and I'm in a league with someone. He actually kind of did this pretty naturally, but it was very clear after the fact. I didn't realize in the moment, but he has Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray now as his quarterbacks. He has all the Chiefs options. So he has Worthy, he has Rashee Rice, he has Kelsey, he has Hollywood, and then he has Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride. So it's just he's all in with the stacks where it's just like, I mean, there's worse things to happen, I'm for sure. And he did. I looked at the moves; they're pretty natural, but I've never seen someone go that heavily into stacks.
No, me neither.
I just had to share that because that's been weighing on me for a while. I needed to share that and get off my chest. Yeah, I think this is just in general, like, I get it. I like Matt said, we don't want to do 24, 25, 26. There's just so much that can go wrong with moving all of those picks, but Josh Allen is as a sure thing as there is out there, knock on wood.
So that's why I'm not going to kill him for it. If you're going to do that over trading your next 3 firsts for like Purdy, Cup, etc. Where you just have no idea where their value is going to be.
Yep. All right, so we're going to touch on the last team within the Gulag, Dan Round, aka Black Country Beavers. I personally, I like the build that they're doing here, and I think it's in terms of like tank race, it's between them and Dudley Degenerates for 101 this year, with plenty of assets in the future as well. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. So it looks like they kind of struck out, like they gambled on QB in the startup. They went with Daniel Jones and Sam Howell. Howell obviously lost his job. They probably recognized that at some point, and they traded for extra firsts. So they got 2 extra firsts in 2025, 2 extra firsts in 2026. This year they have 103, 108, 111, and then 211. But they have 3 firsts this year. So they're set up really well. There's set up to patiently build. Probably. So the one trade that they made that I noticed was to get one of the trades that they made to get a lot of these firsts is they traded Justin Herbert and Ken Walker last November, and they got back Zay Flowers, a 24 first, a 24 second, a 25 first, and a 26 first. So I think that's a really nice trade. A lot of people will be hesitant to trade away a QB like Justin Herbert. If you put 3 firsts on the table, they're going to reconsider. So
we can assume the 24 first is probably 108. That's my guess. 111 looks like their own pick. 108 is probably, so it's like you get the leftover of the tier, that's pretty nice. Yeah.
It's 111 actually. It looks like.
Oh, okay.
So 111.
They got 111 and 211. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And then the 2 firsts next year. Or next 2 years. So even with the first becoming 111 this year, I still think that's a pretty good trade with the 2 firsts next year. You just have to hope for better pick luck going forward.
One thing that I find interesting.
Go ahead.
One thing that I find interesting is that this team and the Deadly Degenerates that you referred to, Brian, are kind of on the same schedule, and they both have excessive picks in the future. And let's not forget, only one team's getting out of the gulag at a time.
Yeah,
So
that's a good
that's
point.
something to kind of keep in mind. Like, if neither of y'all are going to get out of it this year, only one's getting out next year. And then you better be good the following year. You're not going to get out that year either. So that's something that would be a little bit of something I'd be keeping note of. As I was sitting here, as we were going to the final team, my initial thought was, we've been talking about the relegation gulag getting into the gridiron. And my thought kind of was, if I were a team in this, I may just completely disregard the whole relegation thing and just worry about building my roster. But then I get to this situation, and like, I'm looking at myself as probably trying to do the build of like the Dudley Degenerates or the Black Country Beavers. And if I'm one of those teams, I'm sitting there head to head with another squad that looks very similar to mine. So that'd be a little bit concerning.
I think so, Todd. Like, to that point, I think that's all the more reason why I think in Dynasty it's always best to stay flexible, but more now than ever, because you don't know, like, you might get a couple breaks early in the season and get a couple wins that maybe you shouldn't. You stole some wins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of have the ability to shove a little bit closer and give yourself better odds. I've done this in a couple of teams where it's like, I thought I was tanking. I had a bunch of extra assets. I won a couple of games to start the season where I didn't think I would. All of a sudden I'm 4-0, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I can kind of cash out some of these assets and get some sure things and make a run at it. So I think that's what those two teams especially really need to keep an eye on. Like, read the room in both standings and how the other team's doing, and be the team that beats the other. Because then once you get into that top tier, all you have to do is not be last.
Yeah,
Stay
that's
in
a
it.
little bit easier, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
if you think about a contending group of 6 teams in the playoffs, there is always one team that's like hanging on by a thread that's just old dirt. Like, they have no future. So they may even just like tank it out the next year. Like, there's always like that one team. And so I think if it were me, I'm probably just doing what I can to get into the gridiron. Doesn't mean that the next year I'm shoving all in. I'm just going to probably do enough to stay out of the gulag.
Yeah.
And then maybe my year to win is 2026. So that would be probably something that if I'm these teams down here, we're wrapping up the gulag. And Brian, you can take us to the gridiron, but that's probably my strategy, is find a way in, and then I'll retool while I'm playing in the gridiron. Which is risky.
Well, and I think it's worth noting that, I've never played in a league with this format. I know you haven't, Todd. Brian, I don't think you have.
No.
So none of us have ever played. So we're just kind of theorizing off the top of our head on what we would do. And I can't say for sure one way works better than the other.
It's an interesting exercise. Like, I love this creativity, honestly. Like, it's totally different, and I don't know if I were in it, I would like it or not. But like, this is really cool and different, and I'm kind of enjoying like the thought process behind the different decisions that each of these teams are going to face.
Yep. And so the next team that we'll go to in the gridiron division is the Cates Hill Kings by user Central Panda. And this team is the one that I mentioned might have a tough time. Well, they are not going to stay in this division without a trade because they have Kyler Murray, and then the other 2 quarterbacks that they grabbed in the startup were Desmond Ridder and Kenny Pickett in round 7 and 10. And, I understand the gamble there, double tapping 2 cheap QBs, hoping one of them works out. Neither one did. Now they're just down to Kyler, and then those two backups, Stidham, Clayton Tune, Taylor Heineke. So they don't have a starting QB2 on their roster, and they have 109 and 209 in terms of draft picks this year.
So they could take the 109, maybe try to move up and to get JJ McCarthy or Drake May, or they can just sit there and maybe take Bo Nix. So I think they'll probably come out of the draft with a second QB. Most likely, I would hope. If not, then like you said, they're in a tough spot. But this is a decent roster. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, Breece Hall, Kyler. I mean, that's 3 guys that I'm expecting to be, a top 6 QB probably this year is probably what I would project. Top 6 running back, top 6 receiver. TJ Hawkinson, assuming he's healthy, probably a top 6 tight end. So there's some nice pieces here. There's not a lot of depth though. That'll be a little bit concerning.
I wonder if this is the team that, like Matt says, he thinks they will drop out. Is it something that you don't sell off crazy things or anything like that, but like maybe it's worthwhile leaning into it a little bit. I don't know. And then going down to the gulag and then coming back in. They have longer term assets, but like they're lacking depth. Improve their draft picks potentially.
I think it's exactly what you said about getting it out of the gulag. What you said of getting out of the gulag was, hey, if I'm like 3-1 or I'm 4-0, like I lucked into some wins, maybe I shove a little bit. I think it's the same way if you're sitting in the gridiron.
Yeah.
Maybe you started 0-3 and you're like, shit, man, like I have a pretty good team here, but I just got unlucky these first few weeks. I am facing a long road, and you've got these pieces like a Pollard, Godwin, Pacheco, like these pieces that maybe you could sell. And at that point, Keenan Allen, maybe you just say, all right, I'm going to lean into it because I've got my 25 first. Maybe I can go get a top 3 pick. It's going to be hard because you got some teams in the gulag that are also tanking. So it's going to be tough to find yourself into that top 3 pick, but it might be something that I lean into only if I've started like 1-4, 1-3, something like that.
And then just for note, like they would only be able to get themselves to 107, I think, right? Like, because they're technically they have to be in the playoffs with this setting. So
I don't know about how that works,
yeah,
but that adds a wrinkle to it.
It is. It's interesting. It's not nothing I've seen before. So that's why, like, I think if I understood correctly, like these 6 teams are the playoff teams. So like best case scenario, even if you were to lean into it, it's going to be 107.
Okay.
So like, I guess it's at that point you're kind of like, I kind of should be playing for the title.
Would you guys look at moving Breece Hall on this team?
I'm always looking to do that
because I love Breece Hall as much as the next guy. I don't think that I'm trying to carry a running back that has that much value on a team this thin. So like if Breece Hall tears his ACL again this August, you're just completely fucked. I mean, like he's going to go to the Javonte or J.K. Dobbins, route. So that's just a really volatile asset to keep at running back, I think.
What are you like if you were to trade off of Breece Hall in this situation? What are you trying to like position or player? Who are you kind of zeroing in on?
So I'm looking at maybe the guy that has 105 or 106, where you can be pretty confident a quarterback is going to be there, and then see what on top of that person would want to give me for Breece Hall, or something similar to that. I think I'm trying to trade Breece Hall to get a quarterback and then roll with like Pollard, Pacheco, Chase Brown, etc. at running back. But I'm looking to get a quarterback and ideally maybe even 2, like a quarterback and another piece on top. But I just would not go into the season with Breece Hall on this roster and risk another injury to him, because then
here's where it gets interesting, like trading within or outside of the gulag versus the gridiron. If I were to like, I remember like one of the gulag teams has like Kamara and Mixon and like those types of guys. Like you could probably get those guys for cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And like you could do like you're saying, like the Breece Hall trade, quarterback plus whatever that is, and then figure out a way to, like, I don't know, 209 for one of the running backs, 26-2. I don't know, something like that, where you can also get that really cheap production that gulag team probably wants to shed those guys, I would think, probably.
Yeah.
And you're kind of boosting your status as well while gaining a little more depth and maybe a little more flexibility as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's the route I'd go. Is like just throwing out a name that's equal value to Breece Hall is like Trevor Lawrence or Dak Prescott. See if you can get someone like that, maybe a little bit more on top. And then, like you said, can I trade 209 for Joe Mixon? Okay, I can do that. Maybe I can trade that 109 for whatever, a glob wide receiver that Todd hates, something like that. Because I think they're going to need a little bit more depth. But I think there's moves to be made. And again, this team has all their future first, so they could go a variety of ways. They could also sell off and just be prepared to drop out of the gridiron. But from what I understand, the way the two divisions work, man, that would be my last resort. And like you guys said, I would wait until I started off poorly before, willingly dropping into that gulag.
Well, the Cates Hill Kings might have all their future first, but the Harlem Wild Hogs, they do not. So they have traded away all of the future first. They do have a team. They got a squad here. So Brian, pull up their team on Keep Trade Cut. So this is the Patrick Mahomes team with Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne, DK Metcalf, Jordan Addison, Jalen Waddle, Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, Javonte Williams, Jaden Reed, Jared Goff at QB2. So this team has dudes all the way through that starting lineup. Bench is a little weak for a team that doesn't have any of their future picks. So it's not like you're going to be adding depth with your 25 first anytime soon. But there's enough pieces here that if there were a depth concern, they could probably break some of these pieces into two if they had to. But
they got some pieces like Christian Kirk and Kincaid, but not much.
I did mention
not much
Kincaid.
Outside those two guys.
Yeah. So not like the least depth team of all time, but they a couple injuries down could be a little bit of an issue. So, but for example, has McLaughlin. So if Javonte Williams were to go down, I don't know if Javonte Williams is going to be some superstar this year, but McLaughlin could improve his usage if that were to happen. So this is a good team. This is definitely a team that's in the hunt.
And I think that they planned on being in the hunt for the next few years. The reason this team does not have any first round picks the next 3 years, they traded their 3 firsts for Waddle and Javonte. They traded 3 firsts, Jonathan Mingo, and they got back Jalen Waddle, Javonte Williams, and a 3rd round pick. So, I mean, they were probably banking on those picks being late. At the time, maybe they were hoping for a better bounce back season from Javonte than we ended up getting this past year. So that one's didn't age great. But another trade that they made that I really like, you guys know how high I am on CMC, especially when you have a good team like this. They also traded CMC in the middle of last year for Jahmyr Gibbs and Jaden Reed. Now CMC and Gibbs are similar value again. Reed's a nice flex player with a little bit of upside, depending on how next year goes. So I do like that trade that they made, and I think that's the type of trade that you want to make if you're moving CMC.
Yeah, I like that one as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of this Perky 1, 2, 3 kind of reading the room a little bit, and I do need some extra depth here. Jaden Reed, has a pretty high ceiling. He's volatile, and I think Jahmyr Gibbs has a CMC level ceiling. He might not get to that point, but still awesome player. So I don't love the trade, but I like it. So I'm probably the lowest on the 3, but I like it.
Yeah, and none of the 3 of us really love trading the 3 first for Waddle and Javonte, but also on the other hand, I don't really have many recommendations for this team, right? Like you said, Brian, they have a really good team, and a lot of these guys are really young. So to me, you're just gonna kind of hope not to get injured and probably will stay out of the gulag the next few years.
And one thing we talked about this, like just staying out of the gulag is a big part. Like give yourself a 1 in 6 chance every year. Like it's better than 1 in 12, which most leagues are when it starts. But I think it's important to kind of like keep this all in context that he's doing the right things, and we're not going to like play the hindsight game. We're not going to play like the, oh man, this guy is an idiot because of look at this thing that happened now that we know the result, right? Like,
right, yeah.
I could see at some point last year where someone might have thought Waddle was worth 2 1s and Javante was worth a 1, like you're saying. Like, I could see
Yep.
that. I don't necessarily agree, but it's like that is something that it wouldn't been that big of a deal back then. You can't sit there a year later and be like, haha, he's an idiot. That's just not how it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not something that we usually do, but I can totally understand why he came to that conclusion, looking at his team saying, not only do I have a really good team, I have a really young team with, Gibbs, ETN, Mahomes, etc., DK Addison. So I'm going to be good for a while. I can just cash. So I get where he's coming from. I get why he did the move.
Yeah, there's a time where you cash in your chips. I think that's what you got to do at some point in some sense. Yes, I mean that's a really strong team. I think that's a strong contender. Not having picks is whatever, they'll make up for it somehow if they need to. They have assets. So, I think we should move on to our next team, and that is the silent
SMHRC. You were wondering what that acronym was for.
Silent Valley Scrotum Frogs.
Shaking my head, Ryan Clark. There's a million different variations. I would love to hear feedback. Whoever owns this team, SMHRC, please let us know what that stands for. It's probably some like soccer thing that we don't, or football thing that we don't understand. But we would love to hear what that stands for. My Ryan Clark.
This did not occur to me until you just said that, but we call it soccer in England and Europe. They call it football. What the hell do they call the NFL? Is it just both football or
American football?
Yeah.
Oh, Oh, yeah. No shit. Of course. Okay. Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. All right. So the Silent Valley Scrotum Frogs, they have a really strong team. So they got Jalen Hurts, Carr, they got Derrick Henry, James Cook, but then they have Diggs, Devontae Smith, Chris Olave, Freiermuth.
Think though.
Strong team. They got the 106 this year, so that's going to be a really nice pick to add. And the 201, which is like the end of that Bo Nix, Brian Thomas, Jonathan Brooks tier. So I like that. Looking through their team, I wasn't able to see any trades that necessarily stood out to me. They also have Tank Dell on the bench. This is a pretty strong team. Nothing really jumps out at me in terms of what they should or shouldn't do, because I think they're likely going to be able to add one of those top 4 quarterbacks at 106. Nice insurance.
I like what this team's doing. Yeah, I like what this team's doing. I mean, at quarterback, you're probably looking. I mean, you already have Jalen Hurts, so that's locked and loaded. Like you said, you're probably looking at adding one of those top quarterbacks. So maybe that's JJ McCarthy. Maybe that's Drake May. I like what they're doing at running back with the James Cook, Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones. It's like old and gross, but I think this team is kind of like doing enough to stay out of the gulag. And if you can keep adding these pieces, so they're going to add, what do we say, the 106? They're going to add a 106. You're adding the 201 and the 206. You're adding some more pieces there. This team needs a tight end. So maybe if you just hold your nose and run with Carr, and maybe you take Brock Bowers at the 106. Pat Freiermuth is
and a lot of times the 201 pick, I think in the vast majority of my drafts, the 201 is Bo Nix. So
there you go. Yeah, it's a great point.
Hope for Bo Nix and Bowers there.
Yeah, that'd be a for this team. Not only is that good value because Bo Nix is the 201, I've done that at least twice. And I've taken Brock Bowers at the 106 at least once or twice. So I like those values there, and they're perfectly filling positional needs. You can play Derek Carr in the meantime. Bo Nix can fill in once he's rocking and rolling. I like the way this team is built because you got some globby receivers with Devontae Smith and Tank Dell. But
the other thing you can do is if you go 106 Bowers and then you miss out on Bo Nix at 201, maybe you package 206 and 208 and look for a Stafford or Cousins type or something like that. That'll get you through the next couple of years. So
I mean, even Derek Carr just this year, I think can get you through this year to stay out of the gulag.
Yeah,
if I'm this team, I am making it my mission to just stay out of the gulag. maybe you're gonna be in the playoffs, so maybe something good rolls your way in the playoffs, and you screw around and win the league. That'd be great. If not, I think you've done your job staying out of the gulag with this team, and use next year's picks. Maybe use this season to, once you've kind of solidified yourself, maybe you can move Derrick Henry or Aaron Jones. But I think the number one priority for this team is staying out of the gulag and figuring out a way to improve the overall value of the team next offseason.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Why don't we go to the next team here, and that is
Which is our champ.
Country Down Eglantines?
County Down.
Eglantines. Oh, good reading.
Eglantines.
Well, let's just refer to him as the champ. That's who we're talking about here.
Down.
Mr. Tom Payton, the champ.
Oh, so you're telling me the champ has Jordan Love? I'm sure that's a coincidence.
An accident, yeah. He's an 8th round pick,
yeah.
I think, in startup, yeah.
This
so they
honestly
got Lamar
built
Jackson.
somewhat similarly. I mean, you've got the older running back build instead of like a Olave. You've got a little bit of a different. You don't have the tight end, but like you have the running back build. You've got the Lamar versus Hurts. This team has the Jordan Love. Like this team, they're somewhat similarly built.
Todd, you got to scroll down to the IR. They do have Mark Andrews.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So then they have Mark Andrews. Okay, so they have. If this other team can add Brock Bowers, then these two teams are kind of head-to-head similar.
Yeah. So they got Andrews and Aaron Rodgers on the IR. So if you plug Andrews into the Kraft spot at tight end, they're looking a little bit better. And then they do have all their picks. They have 112. They'll probably add a nice receiver, Jonathan Brooks there. And
yeah, Brooks would be a nice plug and play for this team, given that they've only got Connor Eckler really. So that's a nice plug and play for them if they got Brooks.
I'll just make a note really quickly. It's impressive to see how they've obviously hit on some guys like Jordan Love. I think was an 8th round startup pick, or I think that's what I saw. But Quentin Johnson, obviously, I think all of us or a lot of us would have in the moment when they did the startup taken him high. I believe he took him in the 4th round of a startup. So like
middle of the 5th, and that's where he usually
right.
That's where he usually went.
I wasn't saying as much overdrafting as much of just how much of a colossal failure Quentin Johnson's been, and we all agree. But I guess my point being, like, just imagine this again, playing the hindsight game. Imagine this team with like a 4th or 5th round, we'll say 5th round startup wide receiver. Like, I don't know.
We'll just sub in Addison. Say Jordan. It was Jordan Addison.
Yeah.
That's it's just kind of like a bad luck, bad break outcome. But I mean, hitting on Jordan Love is the cream of the crop of this of that startup. Probably. I mean, there's few better outcomes than him. I mean, you got Puka last year. There's not that many of them, and he got one of them with Jordan Love.
For sure.
Yeah,
it's definitely. Like it's Jordan Love and Trey McBride are the two to me that you can look back hindsight, and obviously Puka.
And CJ Stroud, but he was already like a 4th or 5th round startup. But then, but jumping from 4th to 5th to like top 3 is huge.
Yep, totally. I think this is an interesting team for sure. I think they have the potential to run it back with those quarterbacks and Tyreek alone. Like that's like, I believe we looked and there was a yard bonus or a long touchdown bonus, which is like Tyreek driven. I mean, I'm
a little concerned about their depth. So if I'm this team, I think there are some moves before week 1 that I'm trying to look at to address maybe running back or flex.
Like trade Jordan Love.
I wouldn't love doing that. But it is worth keeping in mind that this scoring system is a 4 points for pass touchdown. A lot of times we have leagues that are 5 or 6 where those pocket QBs are worth a little bit more. So as much as I love Jordan Love, he's the type of quarterback that to me is more, I'm more willing to trade in a 4-point format.
You heard it here first. Jordan Love is a sell, Matt.
And but to address their depth, they do have one of my favorite cheap receivers that I was saying a lot of podcasts this offseason to go buy cheap, in Khalil Shakir. I do think he's going to have a nice role in Buffalo next year. So but I would say no major moves that this guy needs to make. I would just look smaller moves, right? Like see if I can trade 212 for a guy, I don't know, Dave Montgomery, or maybe someone else, but like a nice plug and play guy that will get you 12 to 14 points per week. That's probably all I'm really looking to do. Yeah. But yeah, I can see why he's defending champ. He's got some strong pieces.
Yeah. So we got 2 teams left. I would say these are 2 of our strongest teams for this upcoming season that we would probably, if we were setting betting lines on who the favorites were, I would say this is going to be one of them. So this is Samuel Speck. Took the loss in the championship this past year as the number 1 seed. So that's always, I've been there. Been there plenty of times with Samuel. So bounce back. So he's got a good team. I mean, this is a really good squad here. We've got Herbert and Lawrence at quarterback. This is the CMC team. So CMC and Taylor. And they're built out through the receiver as well. So you got Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Nico Collins. Even in your flex spots, you've got Ken Walker, Zach Moss, and then at tight end is George Kittle. The bench has some pieces as well. I mean, this team's deep. You got JSN on the bench.
Yep.
Yeah, you've got Mostert on the bench. You've got Kirk Cousins as a QB3 option that, if one of your quarterbacks go down. So Brian Robinson. I mean, this team's good. They don't have any of their future picks, so it's probably not getting a whole lot better. But this team is a force for this upcoming season for sure. Especially, CMC Taylor, that's just a duo that's got to be the best running back duo in the league.
Yeah, and I like this team kind of like we talked about. They knew where they were at, and if you're going to trade 3 future firsts, do it in this type of deal where you have a really, really good team and you traded Flowers and 3 firsts and you got back Herbert and Ken Walker. And so, that you're set at long-term with Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. They're really good players in real life. And then another trade that they made in that same vein is they traded Gibbs and Jaden Reed for CMC. So this team was fucking going for it.
So that trade for Herbert must have come after the Cousins injury, I would assume.
That makes sense, actually.
So he went down. I didn't even mention they have Will Levis as well. So if this team were to run into any sort of depth issue, you do have 4 quarterbacks. So you can, even Gardner Minshew could be.
I was going to say, I'm talking to, if I'm this team, I'm talking to that team we covered in the gridiron that struck out on Pickett and Ritter, and see if he wants to float me a second or some cheap piece for Gardner Minshew. It doesn't seem like this team needs him at all, really. But this team's loaded. Other than that, probably no real moves to make. Just sit there and compete and contend for the title this year, I would think. And they do look like they have some injury protection at different positions, which is always nice to see. If you don't have future firsts, like even after Kittle, they have Musgrave who you can put in. Like we talked about, they have Levis and Cousins after Herbert and Trevor. So they're deep, they're good. I would expect them to contend for the title yet again this year.
Yep, I'm there with you. I think this is definitely a top 3 team. So like the upper tier of the gridiron. The last team that we're going to cover.
Before you do the last team, who is the other? If you said this is a top 3 team, I'm going to assume that means you think that Samuel Speck is 3rd. Otherwise, you probably would have said they were a top 2 team. Who do you think would be the other top team?
Tom. I think that's just like
Tom
with the
Payton's
scoring.
Team.
Yeah, Tom Payton, the county down.
That's a good team. It's a good team.
Yeah. The
I
defending
think I would
champs,
personally lean the Samuel Speck team because the running backs are just going to onslaught opponents.
Yeah.
But the quarterbacks, give me Lamar over Herbert, give me Love over Lawrence. So, I can see where you're going with that. Makes sense. You got Tyreek also. Yeah,
the
you're
top
right.
three,
You're talking me into it. You're talking me into it. I would take.
I think the
eight
top
too.
I think the top three are like I wouldn't be shocked at all if either of any of the three like were the number one team or the proverbial favorite going into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And the last of the three is the last team that we haven't covered yet. So that's where I'm at personally.
So why don't you take a shot at pronouncing this team name?
the person that can't the person that can't say county. Okay. Biller Berserkers.
Yeah,
Biller,
I have no
Biller
idea what that word is. Billericay.
Berserkers. That's a tongue twister, is what it is.
Welcome to Dynasty Market Watch, where we are illiterate.
The user is GWhite3, and
this is a squad.
Yeah, they got a squad.
Dude, Brian, you know how much of a trade addict I am. I would love to be in this league because this is yet another team that traded 3 firsts. What they did is they traded their next 3 firsts for Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they got back a 25 and 26 second round pick. So, like, that's like a quarter of this league that is not shy about just trading 3 years of first in a row, which those are fun leagues to be in, man, when people are not like really conservative when it comes to trading and they're like, yeah, fuck it. Give me a superstar player and I'll give you 3 first round picks.
There are no trust issues in this league for sure. This is you're saying, like, and Matt, you know, your leagues are famous for this, that it's just like a guy gets traded 48 different times back and forth to managers, and just like depending on like what we're drinking that night or what we're doing the week before, like someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown could shift teams 3 times. Like that's fun. Like you don't know where he's gonna end up. Like tomorrow he could be on my team. I don't know.
And if you go to the league chat and scroll up a bit, a few weeks ago, this team traded for Travis Kelce. They traded the 210 and a 26 third, and they posted a picture of the 2 guys at the bar over a pint of beer. And which I fucking love that. And then this user GWhite3 said the trade was actually a second, a third, and a pint. so the extra pint of beer closed the deal there. And you know, sometimes that's what you got to do. A lot of deals are made on the golf course and over a pint of beer.
Man,
but yeah,
I love it. I love it. Like English fans are the best. This is gonna sound like self-serving a little bit here, but I think English fans are just like they're crazy in the best ways possible fans. So like, yeah, I'm envisioning like they're at the bar, they just watched a soccer/football game, and they're just like, let's make a deal. And this is like kind of like what Matt does with his family members, where they're just like, all right, Zoom chat time. We're gonna talk about this, and this, and like all of a sudden, like 3 league changing players are changing teams. I love it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, this team is really good, man. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Dak, Stroud, Bijan, Amon, AJ Brown, Ayuk, Rashee Rice, as long as he stops like punching and running people over. Rashad White, Laporta, Kelce. So he's got short-term, long-term at tight end with the tight end premium. He's got young running backs. He's got prime wide receivers. This is like, I think what this person probably thought, G White probably thought, was for that Amon deal. I don't think it's giving away a ton of value. He probably gave up a tiny bit, but it was because he hit on his other stuff that he could afford that. Like Laporta was great value, Stroud was great value, Dak was great value. You can do that.
Even Rashee Rice was great value.
Yeah.
Like he's still worth more than he was last offseason, even if he can't stop breaking the law. This team's loaded. This team might be the best team in the league. I would say it definitely is a strong contender next to the last 2 teams that we reviewed. Because, Dak and Stroud, Amon, AJ Brown, Laporta, and Kelce, Bijan Robinson. So they're firing bullets at every position. Usually, so my process when we've been doing these is I kind of like, I go through the team, and my natural inclination is, if I had this team, what would I try and do? I'm trying to sit tight and win the title. I think. I mean, I don't think there's really any obvious moves that they need to do. They got Kelsey for a pretty good price, and as a team that's going to make a title push, that's the type of move that I'm doing. Like, it only cost me a late second and a future third. Why not?
Todd, if you had to rank the top 3 teams, we were just talking about this. What is 1, 2, and 3 for you?
I would go G White 3 is number 1. And we're talking about just for the 2024 season, right?
Yeah.
Not in terms of team value.
the gridiron favorite.
Yeah, so the 2024 favorite, I would go G White 3. I would follow it up with the Tom Payton team. You kind of sold me on that build with the quarterbacks, with Tyreek, with Mark Andrews. Doesn't have much depth. That team is very, like, one injury could just break that team's back, really. Like a Tyreek injury, and that team's done. And then I would follow it up with Samuel Speck. I mean, I would put the Samuel Speck team and the Tom Payton team in the same tier. So I'm kind of splitting hairs there. I like a lot of the stuff the running backs are obviously great. This team also has more team value than the Tom Payton team. So if Samuel Speck team wanted to trade, maybe let's say they wanted to go get a better quarterback. They wanted to go trade like Trevor Lawrence and Will Levis for a better quarterback, or they wanted to trade, Ken Walker. They wanted to upgrade Ken Walker. I don't know. They can do things like that because they have just a little bit more team value.
Yep.
Well, yeah, and they could even trade with each other. Like where, we were talking about the Tom Payton team doesn't have a lot of depth. Maybe you offer like Mike Evans and JSN for Tyreek or something like that because you're making a push for that title. So, I think I'd agree with that order and how you phrased it, Todd, where I think this team is the favorite and then the other two are close second and third in the same tier. I think I'd agree with that.
Yep. I mean, it's boring, but I think those are the top 3. That being said, like there's plenty of potential on both the Gulag and Gridiron that I think it's going to come down to just like, we're talking hindsight stuff, but like, it's going to come down to like who catches the better breaks, who makes the more savvy moves. And I think that's what it's all about, right? In Dynasty, we're trying to like make the savvier move that we see ahead of the curve. Like for all the shit we've given Matt over the year, like the Jordan Love, he was ahead of the game times 1,000, right? So like those types of moves, who's that next guy? Who's the next? No one's going to be the next Puka, but like someone like that emerges that is going to be that value gain. Who's going to get that next guy?
Yeah, and I think that's what we were kind of trying to hit on when we were talking about trading your next 3 years of first round picks. It's not that it's like a dumb idea or a smart idea. It's just that we don't like to build that way because it doesn't leave you a lot of room for like exponential value growth. Like, yeah, you paid 3 firsts and you got a stud, but that stud is still just going to be worth 3 or 4 firsts, even if they maintain their value. Whereas if you can target and you can find that next guy, or if you can make a trade where you're getting, 3 or 4 young guys who are worth a second round pick right now, you only need 1 or 2 of them to really hit and be worth a first and second next year for that type of value growth. So usually I'm bargain bin shopping for that reason. And I've just done a poor job in the past of mismanaging my team, and trading first. And then it's a really tough hole to dig yourself out of. So I've kind of like learned my lesson over the last 4 years of doing that.
Yeah, I've done it one time where I've traded away 3 firsts and a couple seconds. It was when Justin Herbert was probably a top 3 or 4 overall asset. And I traded away three firsts, probably 3 seconds for Herbert. And not even the fact that Herbert hasn't been that great, but it's just put my team into a really difficult spot because I can't try to do a 1-year retool because I don't know my picks. My team maybe is still really good, but I can't get really any better because I can't trade those picks. One of those picks this year turned into Drake May. So it puts you in a difficult spot. And like you said, Matt, you could take one. All it takes is 1 first round pick that could balloon in value and become worth that guy. So it's kind of insulating in a sense because you're trading for a guy that is probably going to hold that type of value. Like Herbert, for example, is still probably, I could still probably get like roughly 3 firsts for him. But it's not giving you the opportunity to hit the lottery and improve team value. So I think that was a good point that you made there.
Yeah, and like one of the first leagues I ever joined with Brian, a league called Wannabe Experts, funny enough, was I traded like multiple future firsts, and it was just for old pieces like Cup, Stafford, Kelsey, Montgomery, and then my team kind of fell apart, and I had to like overpay to get my first back, which became Caleb. And so like last year I was last place in the league, and this year I'm probably going to be last place again. And then next year I should be competitive. And it's just a hard thing to do. You're throwing away multiple years just to get back on even footing and have value growth sustainably going forward. So, that's a big part of what this game is, right? You play for a few years, you trial and error, you see which methods work and which ones don't, and which ones are hardest to overcome if you swing and miss.
Can I just I in that draft, the startup was in February 2022. I picked Trey Lance 201 in a startup.
You just got so unlucky in that draft, didn't you? Like you drafted Gibson high when everyone was drafting him high, and it was just Pitts, who I still believe in Pitts, but he didn't return value yet on that.
I missed on everybody, and then I have Jordan Love. I hit on Jordan Love. I got him in like the 12th round.
I think the biggest point of when you're in situations like that is to not continue to dig. I think people will they'll miss, and we're all guessing. I mean, when it comes down to it on these players, I mean, maybe you view yourself as like I hit on 55% and the bad people hit on 45%. All right, whatever. We're like still like around 50-50 on a lot of our player takes that are around ADP, as long as we're kind of playing around ADP. But so we're going to get unlucky. It's a matter of like who digs themselves bigger holes with bad trades or taking on decaying assets, and then you're digging yourself a bigger hole, and it's like setting yourself back another year. So like we're all going to be in these situations. It's just like a matter of not digging more. And when you add in the fact of a relegation system, it adds another wrinkle to that strategy piece of like we've got some teams that we mentioned here that there's going to be a couple that are on the rise at the same time, and like when do you shove? When do you actually then lose some value to have guys that are actually scoring points? So it makes a fun aspect for this league.
There's a nuance to it for sure that like I think it's very easy to just be like, I'll worry about it next year. That's next year's problem or next year's problem, and you just keep doing it over and over again, and eventually next year comes.
And you're the New Orleans Saints, and you can't.
And now you're the Saints, and you're orphaning your team, and people are shaming you on Twitter. Like that's a tough spot to be in, right? Like but like Todd's saying, like you cut your losses at some point, and you kind of read the room and say, okay, I'm not probably a contender. I'm not really tanking. So what am I doing in the middle? And then all of a sudden, eventually the floor is going to fall out, and then you're in the bottom without assets to go back up for a while. So
well, in this league that we're looking at today, it does, just going off the picture of having a beer together, it does seem like it's a home league where a lot of them are friends. So if you're in a league like that, you can kind of afford to take a long view and say, you know what, we're all buddies. This league is going to be around 3 years from now. I don't need to win in the next year or two. I just need to position myself to have sustainable success, basically.
Yeah, it's a good point. Totally.
All right, well, this was fun.
Yep.
Big Daddy Dyno. Appreciate you all for giving us the opportunity to review the league. If you want any, bounce ideas off of, I think all three of us are open to chatting. So just, slide in the DMs. We'd be happy to help. If we screwed up how the Gulag versus Gridiron works, are bad. So it looks like a fun.
We're not soccer guys.
Yeah. So it looks like a fun method to run a league. But we appreciate you all for listening in and giving us an opportunity to jump in with y'all.
Yep, you got all three of our usernames on the YouTube video here on Twitter, so feel free to reach out to us, etc. Any feedback is more than appreciated.
Yeah, and if you if we talked bad about your team in any way, it was very personal. Just know that.
Direct to Dynasty Peasant on Twitter if you have any issues with what any of us said.
Right down there, right here.
I can handle the complaint inbox.
All right, well, you've been listening to the Dynasty Market Watch, where yesterday's price is not today's price. Thanks for joining.